When someone chooses another person over you, your first instinct might be to internalize it. You begin to question what you lacked, what you could have done differently, or why you weren't enough. But what if the truth is that it had nothing to do with lack and everything to do with alignment? When a person chooses someone else, that action isn't a sign of your failure. It's a redirection from the universe, life, or divine intelligence pushing you back into your original path. You were never meant to fight for a place that required your shrinking. The detour might sting, but it's protecting you from building a future with someone who was never equipped to honor your depth. You have to begin to see rejection not as personal, but as purposeful. This world is structured by vibration, frequency, and attraction. Every decision someone makes has less to do with your identity and more to do with where they are internally. If a man chooses someone else, it's often because he's choosing familiarity, comfort, or ego reinforcement. Sometimes people are not in the emotional maturity required to embrace a person of depth, purpose, and clarity. They gravitate toward chaos, temporary pleasure, or someone who reflects where they are, not where they could grow. And that's not your burden to carry. That's their limitation to sit in. If you try to hold on to someone who was never meant to recognize your value, you're not loving them, you're abandoning yourself. Rejection reroutes you. It shakes you out of illusion. It's one of the fastest ways to awaken your clarity. The moment someone chooses another over you, life is inviting you to stop, breathe, and take inventory of your own power. If they can't see you, they were never meant to hold you. The wrong person can never drain from you what was never meant to sustain them. Your spirit becomes restless when you're in spaces that dishonor it. That restlessness is not sadness. It's a signal. It's the signal that you've overstayed your season in that situation. And when someone walks away, especially towards someone else, they're just activating that signal in you so you finally move in alignment with your next level. So what looks like a betrayal, what feels like a deep ache, is in fact a sacred release. They chose someone else because that's the only direction their soul could go while yours was elevating. It's not just about relationships, it's about frequency. When your energy is shifting into higher truth, people not on that path will naturally fall away. Their exit is your entrance into a new vibration. But you'll miss that entry point if you're too busy chasing closure, explanations, or revenge. The win isn't in keeping what walked away. The win is in standing still and realizing you're being spared from carrying dead weight into your future. Think about this. How many times did you lower your standards to keep them comfortable? How many moments did you silence your intuition to keep peace with someone who wasn't built for peace? That pattern alone should show you it was never a match rooted in truth. It was a lesson disguised as love. And when the lesson is complete, life ends the contract. When he chose someone else, it wasn't to hurt you, it was to free you. He may not have even known it consciously. He may have thought he was just following impulse or desire. But underneath it all, life used him as a tool to liberate you from the prison of your own emotional dependency. You only start to see the power of rejection when you stop begging it to return. When you stop trying to prove your worth to someone who walked away. When you stop using your voice to ask questions they were never wise enough to answer. The most powerful transformation happens in the silence that follows betrayal. You stop fighting the closing of a door. You start noticing all the doors you never saw before. You start realizing your wholeness was never attached to someone else's loyalty. It was buried beneath your fear of being alone. But now, alone doesn't mean abandoned. It means returned. You return to your truth. You returned to your focus. You returned to the vision you kept postponing because you were too distracted trying to keep someone around who was never staying long-term. The pain doesn't mean you failed. It means you invested deeply. But now it's time to invest inward. Rejection is the most honest form of redirection. Life doesn't remove people to punish you. It removes them to purify your path. You might not understand it now. Your ego might crave validation, might still want to hear you were better. You were the one. But the soul doesn't need applause. The soul needs alignment, and alignment always feels like loss before it feels like liberation. You win in the end not because he chose someone else, but because you chose not to chase, because you chose not to compete, because you chose peace over proof, and because you allowed the ending to be exactly what it was, the beginning of something far more powerful within you. When someone walks away from you or chooses someone else, the first blow often lands on your self-esteem. You begin to question yourself in secret. You look in the mirror and silently wonder, was I not enough? That thought sits like a weight on your chest. It lingers in your mind as if their decision was a verdict on your worth. But the truth is this: your value is not determined by someone's inability to see it. You do not become less valuable because someone didn't choose you. You do not become unworthy just because someone else failed to honor your presence. The flaw is not in your being, it's in their perception. A diamond doesn't lose its value in the hands of someone who mistakes it for glass. It remains a diamond regardless of whether it is placed in a showcase or buried in dirt. Your worth isn't up for negotiation just because someone overlooked it. They may have been blind to it. They may have been too distracted, immature, broken, or disconnected to comprehend the fullness of what you brought to their life. But their blindness does not change your brilliance. You were valuable before they met you. You're valuable after they left. That truth does not shift just because someone was too limited to carry the weight of your light. Sometimes people don't choose you because you reflect something they're not ready to face. You reflect growth, you reflect responsibility, you reflect healing. And some individuals are not ready to leave their chaos behind. They're not ready to step into a relationship that requires emotional maturity, depth, and accountability. So they run. They choose easier connections. They choose people who don't challenge them. They choose temporary highs over long-term growth. But again, that choice is about their journey, not your inadequacy. They're not rejecting you. They're escaping themselves. And in that escape, they push away the very thing that could elevate their life. That is not your fault. Your value doesn't shrink because someone else lacks the vision to appreciate it. You do not stop being powerful, beautiful, intelligent, or loving simply because one person didn't reciprocate the same depth. Their decision doesn't erase your essence. It simply reveals their readiness. It reveals their emotional bandwidth. It reveals where they are in their evolution. And if that place is not aligned with where you are going, then their absence is protection. Their choice is confirmation. Confirmation that the connection was never designed to carry you into your highest self. Because real love doesn't discard. It doesn't replace. It doesn't walk away when things get deep. Real love stays, grows, and evolves with you. You are not a placeholder. You are not a backup plan. You are not someone to be compared, chosen second, or kept as an option. You were born with significance, not scarcity. And when someone fails to see that, it's not your responsibility to educate them. It's your responsibility to elevate yourself, to choose yourself, to walk with your head high, even when your heart is broken. Because dignity is not just about how you treat others. It's about how you treat yourself in the face of rejection. You can beg for someone to come back. You can cry over why they left. Or you can remind yourself that the value of gold isn't determined by who decides not to buy it. And there will always be people who don't see your depth. There will always be people who can't handle your truth. There will always be people who choose ease over realness. That doesn't mean you need to shrink. That doesn't mean you need to change yourself to fit someone's small perception. If you start molding yourself to meet their shallow standards, you'll lose the very parts of you that made you powerful in the first place. The moment you water yourself down to be digestible is the moment you stop being who you truly are. And for what? For the temporary attention of someone who already showed you they don't know how to appreciate substance. So you must begin to separate your worth from outcomes. A rejection, a breakup, a silent goodbye None of these experiences are accurate measures of your value. They are reflections of timing, misalignment, and choice, but not your worth. Your worth is eternal. Your worth is fixed. Your worth is not a moving target based on who stays or who leaves. It is set by something higher, something unshakable, and it is your job to protect it, to guard it, to stop giving it away to people who only know how to take. You deserve someone who chooses you not because you convince them, but because they recognize you. They see you clearly. They hold your hand without hesitation. They love you without comparison. Till then, don't allow the temporary blindness of another person to blur your own vision of yourself. Don't internalize their departure as evidence of your deficiency. Instead, let it be a mirror showing you where you still seek outside validation, because once you truly realize your worth is not dependent on who chooses you, you stop chasing, you stop pleading, and you stop breaking your own heart to keep someone else's attention. You rise, you reclaim your power, you begin to see that their choice to walk away wasn't a loss. It was a doorway into deeper self-love, higher standards, and unshakable inner peace. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood. People hear that term and assume it means becoming cold, distant, or uncaring. But that's not what real emotional detachment is. Emotional detachment is mastery over your inner world. It's the ability to feel deeply without being ruled by those emotions. It's not about ignoring pain. It's about not being controlled by it. When someone chooses to leave, when someone chooses someone else, your emotional reaction might be heartbreak, confusion, anger, or sadness. All of those emotions are valid. But emotional detachment is what allows you to observe those emotions without allowing them to run your life or break your spirit. It is what gives you the power to pause instead of react, to reflect instead of chase, to walk away instead of beg. There is a sacred strength in saying nothing. There is power in not responding. There is wisdom in not trying to force your place in someone's life after they've shown you where they stand. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself not to hand over your peace to someone who didn't know how to protect it. The world often teaches you that reacting is strength, sending a message, demanding answers, expressing pain. But true power lies in restraint. When you can sit in silence and let someone walk away without chasing after them, you are not weak. You are disciplined. You are in control. And that control is what separates the broken from the unbreakable. It takes discipline to let someone go without needing to explain yourself. It takes strength to stop yourself from reaching out when your mind is screaming for closure. Emotional detachment teaches you how to sit with discomfort without trying to fix it. You don't need a response to validate your pain. You don't need a conversation to confirm what you already know. When someone leaves, they've already answered your question. When someone chooses someone else, they've already revealed their truth. You don't need more words, you need more silence. Because silence gives you space to see things clearly, to hear your own thoughts, to reconnect with yourself instead of getting lost in their absence. People confuse attachment with love, but attachment is rooted in fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not being enough, fear of letting go. Love is freedom. Love is allowing. Love is peace. When someone walks away and you cling to them emotionally, it isn't always because you love them. It's often because you're afraid of what their absence makes you feel about yourself. That fear binds you. It convinces you that without them, your value decreases. But when you detach emotionally, you reclaim your identity. You no longer tie your happiness to their presence. You no longer hand them the remote control to your emotions. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you forget what happened. It means you stop replaying it. You stop letting the memory dominate your every thought. You stop creating mental movies of what you could have done differently. You begin to understand that their actions were not a reflection of your inadequacy, but of their own inner lack. And in that realization, you free yourself from the cycle of emotional obsession. You begin to take your energy back. You begin to pour that same passion you gave to them into healing yourself, nurturing yourself, and growing yourself. Because that's where real transformation lives, not in changing the past, but in empowering the present. There's a quiet confidence that grows in you when you become emotionally detached. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't listen. You stop proving your worth to people who don't care to see it. You stop trying to be understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding you, and that kind of power can't be faked. It's felt. You walk differently, you think differently, you move with intention, because your peace becomes more important than their approval. Your silence becomes more valuable than their attention. And your future becomes brighter than your past. Emotional detachment also allows you to see the relationship for what it really was, not what you romanticized it to be. When you're emotionally entangled, you magnify the good moments and downplay the red flags. You hold on to hope instead of accepting reality. But when you detach, clarity floods in. You begin to see where you compromised too much, where you were breadcrumbed emotionally, where you ignored your intuition, and that clarity becomes your compass. It teaches you what not to accept again. It prepares you for something better. It makes you wiser, stronger, and far more intentional. You can still love someone and detach. You can still grieve what was and choose peace over pain. Detachment doesn't require bitterness. It requires boundaries. It doesn't ask you to harden your heart. It asks you to protect it. You don't need to shut down emotionally to move on. You just need to redirect that energy inward, back to your goals, back to your purpose, back to the person you were before they became the center of your world. You were whole before they came. You are still whole now. Their departure may hurt, but it doesn't define your story. What defines your story is how you rise in silence, how you glow in the dark, and how you keep walking forward without needing anyone to walk with you. When you stop chasing, everything starts shifting. What you don't beg for begins to gravitate back to you, not because you pleaded or pursued, but because you stood still in your power. The act of not chasing is not rooted in pride or ego. It's grounded in the deep knowing that your value is not conditional on someone's presence. You attract power when you choose silence over desperation. When you refuse to run after someone who walked away, you are sending a clear message. Not just to them, but to the universe, to yourself, to the energy around you, that you are complete without needing someone else to validate it. You're not incomplete without them. You're intact. And from that place of internal wholeness, everything begins to reorganize in your favor. Chasing is fueled by lack. It's driven by the fear of losing someone, the fear that if you don't act, they'll forget you, move on, or replace you. But real connection isn't sustained by pursuit. It's sustained by mutual recognition. If someone needs to be chased to stay in your life, their presence is already unstable. And if their affection depends on your effort to convince them, it's not love. It's manipulation. Power begins when you decide that you are not in the business of convincing anyone to see you, to want you, or to choose you. When you stop calling, texting, checking, posting for attention, or trying to show them what they lost, you begin to redirect that same energy into your evolution. There is a calmness that surrounds people who know their worth. They don't beg, they don't force. They don't argue for a seat at a table they're willing to build themselves. When you don't chase, you allow nature to take its course. You create space for clarity. If they come back, you'll know it wasn't because you begged. It was because something within them woke up to what they were blind to before. And if they don't, you still win. Because the energy you withheld from chasing gave you space to attract someone who doesn't need to be begged to stay. There is no loss in letting go of someone who was willing to walk away. The real loss would be abandoning your dignity just to keep them close. Letting go of the chase doesn't make you heartless. It makes you fearless. It makes you wise. It means you are strong enough to feel the ache without acting on it. That internal control, that ability to sit with your own discomfort and still choose silence, is magnetic. People are drawn to those who remain grounded under pressure, because there is something powerful about not reacting. There is something mysterious, intriguing, and radiant about a person who refuses to collapse emotionally just because someone exited their life. And the very people who left often circle back, not because you went after them, but because you didn't. Your non-response echoes louder than any desperate attempt ever could. Your stillness speaks. Your absence becomes felt. Chasing puts you in the energy of desperation, and desperation repels. It clouds your mind. It distorts your dignity. You begin making choices from anxiety instead of assurance. You start bending, adjusting, lowering yourself to gain back something that might not even be right for you. But when you stop chasing, you shift the frequency, you rise, you reframe the dynamic, and you begin to attract, not through force, but through gravity. There's a gravitational pull that comes from inner peace. When you're secure within yourself, you don't have to scream for love. You become love, you embody it. And people feel that without you having to explain it. What happens when you no longer chase is that your standards become louder than your words. You don't have to keep telling people what you deserve. They see it in how you move, in how you don't tolerate emotional games, in how you don't participate in confusion, in how you walk away the moment something starts threatening your peace. That quiet confidence becomes your language. You stop debating your worth. You stop negotiating your position in someone's life. Because you've realized that anything that can be taken away by your silence was never truly yours. And anything that is real won't need to be chased. It will meet you where you are. People come back not because you begged, but because you didn't. The moment you stopped trying to prove, explain, or impress, you became a mirror to their own insecurities. They feel your absence not because you made noise, but because you made none. In the silence, they begin to hear what your presence used to fill. And whether they return or not no longer matters, because you're no longer sitting in that place of emotional dependence. You've already grown past it. You've already elevated. Your focus has shifted from needing them to nurturing you. And that is where true power lives. In the quiet decisions you make when no one is watching. In the discipline to not respond. In the strength to walk away from what weakens your spirit, even when your heart wants to stay. When you don't chase, you force the truth to surface. You find out who's willing to meet you halfway, who respects your silence, who notices your absence. You stop performing. You stop overextending. You allow the balance of energy to expose what was always real and what was only attached to your attention. And you realize that everything you once tried to chase is now being magnetized by the very thing that makes you rare, your refusal to beg. When someone walks away from you, especially when they choose someone else, your instincts may scream at you to fight, to hold on, to prove your worth one last time. The heartbreak pulls at you, telling you to reach out, to explain, to plead for another chance. But the truth is, when someone has already decided to leave, trying to convince them otherwise only prolongs your suffering. You don't win by forcing a return. You don't rise by holding on to someone who already let go. You win when you accept what happened and recognize it as a necessary breaking point. A divine separation that is pushing you out of a chapter you've already outgrown. It may not feel like it at first. It may feel like failure, like abandonment, like betrayal. But what if that ending is the very thing standing between who you are now and who you're becoming? People are not always meant to stay forever. Some relationships exist only to wake you up, to expose your blind spots, to trigger your deepest fears so that you're finally forced to confront them. And when they leave, it's not just them exiting, it's life removing the distractions that were preventing you from stepping into the next version of yourself. The version that no longer settles. The version that no longer negotiates with pain. The version that finally says, I am enough as I am. When you stop fighting for a place you are meant to outgrow, you reclaim your peace. You stop handing over your power to someone else's decision. You stop obsessing over why they didn't choose you, why they moved on so quickly, why they never looked back. And instead you start asking deeper questions. Why was I trying so hard to stay in a space that no longer fed me? Why did I ignore the signs, the patterns, the red flags that pointed to emotional misalignment? Why did I base my value on their presence instead of my own presence with myself? That shift in awareness is the real victory. Because the moment you start questioning your own attachment instead of their rejection, you begin to heal. You outgrow people the same way you outgrow clothes. They no longer fit the person you're becoming. Sometimes you shrink yourself just to stay in a relationship that feels familiar, even if it's draining. You dim your light, suppress your truth, and compromise your boundaries for the sake of peace. But peace built on self-betrayal is not peace at all. It's a quiet form of destruction. And when life takes that person away, even through pain, it's setting you free from your own pattern of shrinking. You begin to stand taller. You begin to take up space again. You begin to remember the parts of you that were buried underneath the weight of that relationship. Letting someone go who chose someone else is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but it's also one of the most empowering because it teaches you that your worth isn't tied to being chosen. It's tied to choosing yourself. Every time you allow someone to leave without begging, without chasing, without negotiating your value, you reinforce a new standard, a new belief, a new energy. And that energy reshapes your future. You start attracting different people, different opportunities, different experiences, ones that don't require you to fight to be seen, ones that recognize you the moment you arrive. Growth is often quiet. It happens in those moments when you resist the urge to send a message, when you close your mouth instead of defending yourself, when you sit with your pain instead of projecting it. That is where your power is reborn, in the restraint, in the discipline, in the decision to let go of what no longer chooses you. You don't have to fight for love. Love doesn't need convincing. Love stays. Love communicates. Love grows with you. And when someone walks away, especially towards someone else, they are simply showing you that they were never equipped to grow with you. They weren't your forever. They were your lesson. A painful one, yes, but a necessary one. You win by not needing closure to move forward. You win by not turning your pain into a performance. You win by choosing silence over self-betrayal. And most of all, you win by letting that ending be the spark that ignites your transformation. Because the moment you stop fighting to stay in someone else's story, you begin to write your own. A story where your peace is non-negotiable. Your value is not debated, and your love is not begged for. The ending becomes your freedom. The silence becomes your clarity. And what looked like loss becomes the very thing that makes space for everything you truly deserve. The person who left didn't take anything from you that was meant to stay. They took with them the version of you that tolerated being an option, the version of you that accepted breadcrumbs, the version of you that stayed in rooms where your soul was suffocating. And now all that remains is the real you, the one who no longer needs to chase, to prove, to earn affection. The one who walks in truth, who loves in fullness, who leads with purpose, you win by stepping into that version, not out of revenge, not out of pride, but out of a deep knowing that your healing, your wholeness, and your future were never tied to someone who didn't choose to stay.